We just saw I Origins, and on this show, I take some friends out to see a movie. We review it in the car, and then we have a bit of a discussion after that. The review is spoiler-free, so if you are wondering if we would recommend this movie to you or not, check out the review. If you have no interest in seeing it and just want to hear our thoughts, or you have seen it and kind of want to get more details, check out the discussion portion after the initial review. So I Origins is... It seems so much while you're watching the first probably half or so of the movie that it's going to have been spoiled by the trailer, that it's going to just be the trailer, where Michael Pitt's character, is going to India to try and find this pair of eyes that belong to somebody else, and that. From the trailer, that feels like that was going to be like the first act, that he was going to go out there and do that, and that ends up being the majority of the movie is exploring that and getting through that. But there's a much more subtle kind of story that it's telling, and they're a little bit more engrossing than that. I also feel like it's a movie that if you get into it and you get frustrated and you stop watching it, you'll miss out. Because the ending really pulls it together. It really puts a bow on it in a really nice way. Whereas the rest of the movie is just sort of, it's not confusing. It's just very hard to tell which direction it's going to go. Like what the message of the movie is, or what it is trying to tell you. Michael Pitt and Britt Marling are both very good. Michael Cahill, the director and writer, obviously, to me, this is another home run. It's a much more verbose and sort of detailed movie than Another Earth was, where Another Earth is a lot more of a very straightforward, very simple story that's a lot more about body language and visual storytelling versus I Origins, which is a lot more about being dialogue and discussions about spirituality and those sorts of things. But I would definitely recommend it. If you haven't seen Another Earth, definitely go check that out as well. That's a really fantastic movie, and I will go into a lot more detail in the discussion portion of it, but I certainly don't want to ruin it for anybody that hasn't seen it, because it is worth seeing. So that's my version. What'd you guys think?
I was very lukewarm on it. Parts of it,
extremely lukewarm.
Extremely lukewarm. A solid 2.5 stars. Because some of it really worked. I get what it was going for in the end, and it wasn't enough justification for me. And there was so much confusing red herring symbolism in this movie that I kind of get what it was going for with that, and I just got tired of it after a while. This is a good movie to like rent probably down the road, but I wouldn't say it's really important to rush out and see anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. I agree. I mean, there's nothing that's lost by seeing it on a smaller screen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ultimately it just kind of bored me. I never really fully engaged with it. I mean, there's moments that do really work. It's very well directed and beautifully shot. And there are certainly moments that are very affecting. But ultimately, it's interesting to hear you guys even talk about wondering where the movie will go and how it will get there and what it's trying to say, because I never did. I never engaged with it enough to even care that much.
Yeah.
I'm just like, well, I don't get why Michael Pitt likes this European lady, or does he? And and where it goes from there, without getting spoilery, it's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It was kind of, and it's too bad. I loved Another Earth. I really did, and this was kind of similar and very similar subject matter, but I never really felt like it got there. And I was interested in this movie because I really enjoy Britt Marling and her previous two films, Another Earth and Sound of My Voice, which are all kind of similar subject matter, but this one just kind of never really got there for me, I feel like. But Yeah, really, really well directed, though. I have to say, it was beautiful to watch.
Okay. So that's the basic version. If you want to go check that movie out, please do. Don't let us spoil it. It's definitely a movie that has massive spoilers in it, and that we would give away as part of the discussion. You can't talk about this movie without getting into that stuff. So stop watching this if you're going to watch I Origins. Go watch Another Earth. It's out on stream services and all that now. So before I get to like the big reveal or the big spoiler part of it, the movie kind of does this tug of rope thing with spirituality versus science.
Yep.
And it does it in a way that is so detail oriented and it's so complete that I felt as though in a way that could be perceived as a negative on the movie, because of how much detail they go into. But early on in the film, Michael Pitt's talking about how one of religion's or whatever you want to call it, religion's main argument against evolution or science is that the human eye could not have evolved.
Right. There has to be intelligent design for the eye to exist.
There has to be intelligent design for the eye to exist. Now that's a fallacy, and if you choose to believe that, that's fine, but that's a scientifically understandable. There's a way to explain that evolution does indeed.
Yeah, I think science already had that figured out.
It's been fairly recent. I mean, it's been within the past 20 years or so that we really nailed that, but that is something that's been figured out. And so, if you watch a science fiction movie and you expect to agree with all the science, or you expect it to teach you something new, you're almost always going to be disappointed. I always look at science fiction as, this is just a superhero story without superheroes. What they're telling me, I just need to buy that that's how this world works.
Yeah.
That's how they think about it. There was never a character, besides the Indian community center woman, that really specifically represented spirituality in this. But the story did, in the second act, start turning toward Britt Marling's character first, and then slowly Michael Pitt's character started sort of buying into this idea that maybe there is something like reincarnation, where an iris pattern matches a personality from one person to another. And the way that they explore that and discover that is all really, really interesting. What did you guys think of that?
I thought that there was so much this is science and we're explaining this all to you, that it made the things they didn't explain really stand out for me. They made sure to explain so much, there's only, one iris pattern per living human on the planet and all this stuff. And they made sure to go into all that. And then the fact that the guy couldn't find the eye wash station that was 2 feet away from him, it just made that kind of stuff really stand out to me. And also just that whole secret cabal that was looking at iris patterns that kind of went away. I didn't understand what that was about. There was a lot of weird side things going on.
It was there to be a plot convenience.
Yeah, if it was just there to make the 11-11, there was a sequence where the main character, he sees a lot of 11s all in sequence, and it kind of leads him to that lady. And he's really into that pattern, and then he immediately goes back into well, no, but I'm all about science. Except for this one moment where I was all into the weird patterns leading me someplace. And it just everything bounces back and forth so much.
But that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's the whole plot. Is weaving back and forth between. I have this sort of sense that this might actually have some truth to it, and then trying to logically prove that, trying to scientifically prove that. So it vacillates back and forth between all of that.
It felt like a lot of techno babble and maddeningly handholdy to me. Of all right, I see where you're going with this. but thank you for taking 30 minutes to get there anyway, movie.
I think they said data points like 400 times in that movie.
Basically, the second, I felt almost like the second that it revealed, like, oh, hey, we're trying to set up that iris patterns prove that reincarnation exists or whatever. We could have just smash cut to India and the rest of the movie. It felt so overlong.
We could have, right? That could have been the way the movie was. But I felt like one of the things that this movie had to prove from the trailer and from its premise was you had to believe that this guy would actually go to India and look for someone based on just their iris pattern. And if you begrudge them for taking their time and really setting that up, I think that's a disservice to the storytelling and the filmmakers, because none of us are sitting here going, and then they're just in India looking for eyes for some reason. Like, we really know what it took for them to get to that point and want to do that.
Yeah. I liked the message of grief and that him grieving over his dead, I guess they were married for a day, wife, and that almost his just temporary need to believe in the spirituality and like the spiritual world to get over her. And it seemed like once he just kind of needed that moment and then he could kind of move on. And that part of the movie really worked for me. That religion and spirituality can kind of be whatever you need it to be to get through your life. And that kind of seemed to be, I can't remember the character's name, his wife that got killed by the elevator early on, was kind of trying to get across to him is like, why are you trying so hard to disprove that there's like spirituality and God in the world when it doesn't really matter?
Yeah, I guess you make a good point that she does actually represent spirituality in the movie.
And that it can be transient and come and go out of your life, and it doesn't always necessarily make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that it's studying it too hard is what ruins it.
Well, I guess it all kind of brings up what didn't work for me is I never bought any of the connections between these characters. I didn't ever buy Michael Pitt and whatever the actress's her character's name is, Sophie, like why they were together. I guess I did get that like maybe he didn't even care about her all that much, as he kind of indicates later on.
They had those arguments before she died, and they were having the argument in the elevator.
They just never bought that they were in love, other than for the reason like we're in love because we're in love and we should be. And then, like, it just made Britt Marling's character seem really weak for the rest of the movie. Of like, I'm not even sure how I should feel about their relationship, and nobody in the movie, except for one moment where Michael Pitt really lets go, like, nobody ever seems to care too much about anything. Like, they'll hit the emotional beat, but it rings false. And Michael Pitt's whole motivation throughout the movie of, I'm a scientist to disprove God, said no scientist ever. But that seems to be, like, his whole motivation for why he is doing that.
I believe he actually says that very early in the film.
He does, and then they hit it later on again in that talk show part of like, well, I did this to disprove God, as scientists do.
Right.
That's why we get into science.
It's just to disprove God.
And so I don't know, it just never really hit it for me, and so a lot of it felt almost screenwriter 101 to me, of like how to hit these beats but not how to make them feel important.
Yeah,
I actually think it did a spectacular job of not committing itself to either side of that story. What it did well was it used the argument, it used that discussion again as a way to carry us through the movie,
right?
As a way for, it's insane for us to have a scientist who's trying to evolve the eye on a worm, and that they do it in like the first act of the movie. They like Britt Marling's just like hanging out by herself, and she figures it all out, and they've got this worm that can do light sensing and that kind of stuff. But again, it's one of these things where if this movie had an agenda, If it was trying to tell you that spirituality was the right answer, or conversely that science was the right answer, I would have felt a lot more condescended to. I would have felt a lot more like I just watched propaganda for an hour and a half.
Right.
But what this did a lot better was it used all of those things as a device. It didn't come out and say anything was right or anything was wrong. All it did was explore those things and say that there's, that he gets this closure, he gets this comfort at the end of the movie that doesn't really satisfy him scientifically, and it doesn't really satisfy him spiritually, but it satisfies him emotionally. And I think that's kind of the crux of the movie. If the movie had ended with her passing the test, 100% passing the test, and then bringing her back to America or whatever that next thing was going to be, that would have really bothered me. That would have ruined the movie for me. And if they had immediately gone to India and it had been this whole congressional hearing about how all this works and them trying to prove the spirituality, again, that would just be completely ridiculous.
I did like he was like, "Have you seen these eyes?" And that lady right away was like, "Yes."
Yes, because we all immediately recognize eye patterns.
Yeah.
We're all so into eyes. I mean, I guess I get it, whatever.
Yeah.
She's an iris scanner.
Well, and to Juliette's point, by that stage of the movie, if it had been, nope, we got another half hour to look for this
looking
girl,
around for eyes,
it would have been just painful at that point.
Yeah. I guess it felt kind of shallow to me. I mean, I understand the debate and that the characters represent ideas, but I don't know how fully fleshed out I feel like Mike Cahill really fully fleshed out the ideas of what it's supposed to represent.
Yeah, I could have done with a little less science babble and a little bit more character development.
Yeah, because the characters just, I don't know, kind of flat to me.
Particularly his wife, ultimately, in the film. She was basically a robot the whole time.
I'm just here to support you.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and again, the other side of that coin is that if we know that any character is immutable, if we know that any character is unassailably one way or the other, then there's no movie.
Right.
There's no plot. There's no way to take us through it. If we understand the characters at a fundamental level, there's no reason for us to watch the movie because they've already made up their minds. They've already had their decisions, and so it is character development, but it's very realistic and subtle character development.
Very subtle.
So
I don't know. It felt like they were hitting plot beats they were meant to hit. I don't know. Just didn't get me. I don't know.
Eye Origins.
And
Get it on Redbox.
Yeah. And you know what? They told you the origin of the eye halfway through.
That's true.
Checked right out after
worms.
that. Yeah, worms.
Little worms.
Thanks for watching our review. If you like the way we do these, please like the video and subscribe. It helps us out quite a bit. And check out all the written and video reviews at dalemaxfield.com. Thanks for watching.